Well, after a suspicious escape from one of their marks, Philip and Elizabeth begin to have more doubts than ever as the show quickly starts to move towards the end. Hey guys, remember the Americans, Season 5, Episode 9, IHOP, and I was definitely really looking forward to this episode, especially because it seemed like we were really getting towards something big in the last episode, because usually when something big doesn't happen, something really big happens in the next one, and while this episode wasn't like a huge episode, this was definitely, I think, the best episode of the season. I really did love this episode. A lot of interesting stuff going on here, and it was mainly a catch-up episode because we caught up with a lot of characters here that we haven't seen in quite some time and that I kind of thought we were done with, but this episode actually reintroduced us to them, and the episode, it also had a lot to do with, parents and children. I thought that was also very well done, but let's just get into this episode because there definitely is a lot to talk about here, and right off the bat, we start with a storyline that I thought we were, like, done with. I didn't think we were ever going to see something like this again, but we actually did. We see more of, Philip and Kimberly, actually. Remember Kimberly? Yeah, that pot-smoking teenager that he had that weird sort of relationship with. Yeah, we actually do see her here. Basically, we start off and we see him getting a report about some act of bloody violence. We don't really know what it's about, but we cut to Kimberly's birthday, and Philip is cutting a cake, and they talk about, like, getting older and having a family, and, like, if there's one thing that he really wanted, it's having a family and trying not to screw it up. And when Philip is talking about this, I feel like he's in large part talking about his actual family, because in many ways, they have very much screwed things up, whether that be by telling Paige about everything and her entire life basically changing because of it, or how things are between him and Elizabeth, because things have really not been great for the past several episodes, or the past several seasons, I'd even say. Things have not been great between these two, or even the fact that he decided to join, because we know he's having a lot of regrets with joining the KGB in general, but this was a very strong beginning, because we know this has been on Philip's mind a lot, and that was something that this episode really does explore, is this whole idea of screwing up the family, which is a tendency that the Jennings have, definitely do a lot. And one of them does involve Tuan, of course, because we see Philip and Elizabeth, they go to, like, their office or whatever, and Philip basically asks, actually Elizabeth asks rather, if Tuan ever says anything about girls to him, because she thinks that he's lonely, and basically, she says that she's planning to go spend the night at their house with him to give him a sense of belonging, and basically, she just wants to be there because she feels he's kind of alone and that he needs someone to be there with him, and they get a call from the center, and it's for a doctor's appointment for Philip because one of Gabriel's other operatives actually needs to report some information. We don't really know what that's all about, but I thought that was definitely a very strong start, and I like that they are talking about Tuan. There's a lot of things about Tuan that they really don't know in this episode, and that definitely does show here. Like, Tuan is a character that, sure, they are definitely pretending to be in a familiar relationship with. They are pretending that he's their son and everything, but in reality, they don't really know shit about him, and I thought that was something this episode definitely did capitalize on quite well. So, over at the FBI, counterintelligence just translated an intercept from Thailand, which is showing a group of known KGB agents that went in and out of the country at the time that Gad was murdered, and I was surprised that this was coming back, but truth be told, actually, we never really got any sort of coverage with this. Like, Gad was murdered, and then it kind of just stopped because we had that time jump, as we know. So this does seem to be coming back into the picture where they want to find out more about who actually killed Gad, and Stan Beeman's boss is telling him that he knows how he feels about squeezing Oleg, but it might take years for them to get someone like that inside the KGB again, which, I mean, yeah, he's true. That Oleg's one of the only people that they can genuinely trust and could actually possibly help them, even though Stan doesn't want to get him involved, and I feel like it's really only a matter of time before that happens at this point. I mean, Oleg is doing a good job of staying low and trying to keep cover and, stay away from them, but I feel like they can only go on for so long. Eventually, he has to get involved, but basically, he says that he could be next on their list, or him, or any of them could be a target, and so let them use the tape against him and get him working with them against the Soviet Union. Obviously, that's what they're trying to do. Because again, to Stan's boss, he's just another Russian. That's really all he is. He's someone that they obviously can't trust. He's someone that is very shady, and he doesn't really know the sympathy that Stan has for Oleg, or rather, he doesn't really understand it. Because again, to him, he is just another Soviet Union. That's really all he is. He's just another, he's just another person in the Soviet Union who, has gone through a lot and who is out to get them, he feels. So I thought that definitely does show the contrast between these two, and that's something they're showing very well this season, is a contrast between Stan and all the other agents. While all the other agents kind of just look at Soviet Union as disposable human beings, Stan really does see them as human beings. They just kind of see them as disposable, not trash, that's not the word, but disposable pests, essentially. Stan really does see them as actual human beings, and he sympathizes with them. He knows what they're going through, mainly because of his experience with Nina, his sort of alliance with Oleg, and it's kind of making me think that if he finds out that Philip and Elizabeth are, in fact, spies, obviously I think he's going to feel a little bit betrayed, but I feel like he's going to have this sympathy for them. Like, he's going to understand why they did what they did and why they've hid this from him, and I don't know if it's going to go exactly the way we think it's going to go. At least it seems like that's what they're setting up, because, we're inevitably going to, that's like the inevitable thing of the season. Like, the season has to end with him finding out. It just has to. And I don't think he's going to react quite in the way we think he's going to. But again, I could be wrong. We'll have to see. So Elizabeth goes to spend some family time with Tuan, and she finds the house empty. It's late, and obviously she's very worried. She calls his friends to see where he is, but unfortunately the Morozovs haven't actually seen him, so something is wrong. She sets about searching Tuan's room, even measuring how wide the open space is between his closet doors so that she can set it back exactly where it was, and everything is going through her head at this point. She has no idea where he could possibly be. He could have snuck out. He could have been captured. There's so many possibilities here, and I really did love that tension here because, again, Tuan's someone that they don't know if they can fully trust at this point. Sure, he's helping them, but how do we know that he is very loyal, and how do we know he's not just going to betray them? Sure, maybe he could be a William, but at the same time, maybe he could also be a Claudia. Who says we can actually fully trust him? So Philip is then listening to his latest recording from Kimmy's father, and that gruesome incident he was discussing is actually not from artillery, it's from hemorrhagic fever, which was the same kind of thing that William helped the KGB steal for American bioweapons last season. And again, I thought it was interesting this came back in the picture, but he talks about how there's this group of Mujahideen who died in a hemorrhagic fever, and maybe it wasn't about protecting them after nuclear attack, maybe they just wanted to use it in Afghanistan. Again, this is really them rethinking that they've sort of done everything wrong. Maybe their mission was never to acquire protection and try to keep it away. Maybe they wanted to use it for another reason, and maybe they had to do the opposite of what they're really told. And I think it's very interesting the way they're kind of rethinking a lot of their prior missions. So Elizabeth is telling me they don't really know it's the same virus that they gave them. Again, she's trying to stay optimistic here. And he says it's just a coincidence if it's not. Like, it has to be the same type of illness that they gave them. But she also has bad news for him, too. Tuan, of course, was gone at 3 a.m. and feels very wrong. So they decide to hit him up with some surveillance to see what their son is actually up to. And, Phil brings up a point that he could possibly be allied with the Americans. So they really don't know what to think at this point. And Phil then goes to his doctor's appointment, and he meets an Orthodox priest who relays some information that really doesn't mean much to Philip. Like, all this information he doesn't really care about, but it was very vital to the KGB, and Gabriel would probably have known the context, but of course Gabriel's not there to do that for them. So the priest asks, when he's going to see him again when Philip departs, and basically Philip tells him if something urgent comes up, then the new person who's coming to work with him should be here in 2 to 3 months. And basically, I really like this scene because he talks about how when he hears things, he used to just tell Gabriel, and he always said it was very important for him. Then they would talk talk things through. But Gabriel's gone now. And what I really loved about this scene is that it really does show that Gabriel leaving does not just have an impact on Philip and Elizabeth, it has an impact on quite a lot of people. Gabriel was a very caring man, and sure, he definitely was a bit of a menacing figure, and he was quite persistent, but he was someone you could go to always confide in and always relay information to, and he always knew how to help people. And him and the priest clearly did talk a lot, and they had a lot of different sort of conversations, and he was clearly craving the human contact that served as respite from such secrecy. Like, he really did enjoy getting to tell Gabriel all this stuff, and he really wants to know where he is. But Philip says that he just can't meet with him on a regular basis because he's not Gabriel. That's just not who Philip is. I mean, Gabriel would sit with him and talk with him whenever he wanted to. He'd probably even make time for the priest, but Philip is just not that, not that way. He just has too much to deal with. I mean, think of all the things that Philip's dealing with. He has to deal with the fact that Tuan is on the loose right now. He also has Kimmy. Then he has his real life with Henry. Then he has to kind of help Stan and figure out if Renee is actually, a Russian spy or not. Then he has to go back to Deirdre. I mean, it's just a lot for one man to juggle, and to do all of that and go back to the priest is just saying way too much. Gabriel is just a handler. That's why he had all this time for the priest, but Philip just can't possibly do that. And I don't know if they're setting up Philip leaving the KGB, but I feel like that's where we're going to go here. And I know that's definitely not going to happen because he has to get caught at some point. I think he was going to want to leave the KGB, but I just don't think that's going to work out for him. And again, I think that's a big regret that he's really having. But the priest tells him that he will pray for him, and Philip just says, okay. And he says that he should try it. And Philip says that he keeps hearing it, and the priest says it's a great solace, especially when you live in this kind of life. And this is something that the show is always kind of, focused on, is the idea of religious solace. And, we know Philip and Elizabeth have always kind of been against that because, that's just not how they were raised. That's not the kind of thing that they usually do. But Philip, you can tell, is a bit interested. Like, he's a bit kind of, he kind of wants to maybe use this to his advantage and maybe actually find a way to use religion in his life. And I thought that was definitely interesting to see here. I'm interested in seeing if Philip is actually possibly going to use that. But I thought that was definitely a very well done scene. Like I said, it really just showed the void that Gabriel's left behind and how Philip really doesn't know how to move on without him. And not just him, but there are many, many people who are really missing that Gabriel in their life, and they want to get that Gabriel back. But unfortunately, there really is only one Gabriel, and that's something this episode definitely shows very well. So, news about Gad's killers have weighed on Stan, and so he goes to a visit with someone who no one has come to see, that being Gad's widow. For some reason, no one has come to see her. It's only been Stan, and she said it's nicer than to come by since no one from the office has actually been by or called, simply because they just didn't care. Like, it's just another agent. They don't care that he died, and it's really fucked up, but they're so wrapped up in the whole getting Oleg and things like that they just don't care about the smaller things. Stan, however, does, because he actually did have a lot of care for Gad. I mean, remember those two? Gad actually gave him advice moving forward. They had a very strong friendship. Stan was really someone who actually really cared about him. They weren't just agents. They were genuine friends. And he says it's awful that they're not the best at that. And after some pleasantries, she gets to the point. She asks if he just came to visit, and he tells her that they have a better sense of what happened in Bangkok, that it was them, but there's more. And he says that he has something on someone else, an unrelated case, but the department wants him to use it to get back at them. And the thing is, this guy didn't do anything, but the opposite is that he didn't see putting him at risk to go after other people. Revenge isn't that important, and he doesn't think it would be to Gad. And as we know, this has nothing to do with revenge. I mean, Gad ran through a glass house, and that's how he died. It wasn't because anyone killed him. It was because he was terrified that the KGB was there and that they were going to kill him, so he ran away, and that's, of course, what killed him, as we know. So that's the whole interesting thing about this, is that no one actually did kill him. It was all kind of natural causes. Like, I wouldn't say natural causes, but it was basically like the laws of nature that killed him, you could very well say. So Gad's widow considers this, and then she hits him with a line and basically says that he actually would want revenge, and that's something that Stan doesn't feel he would want, but she thinks that he would. And Stan might have to come to that conclusion that he might have to get Oleg, even if he doesn't want to. I think he's going to have to get Oleg on board at some point. So we then go back to the Jennings house, and we get this very big scene with Henry, which I really do like the way the show is giving Henry something to do, because Henry's always been a character that's always been confined to the background, and they're finally giving him something to do here. I do think they're setting up his exit from the show. I think that's kind of inevitable. That's where we're headed here, but he talks about how he has, as we know, become very close with these friends, especially specifically Chris, this girl who his parents feel he has a crush on. He says he doesn't. I think he definitely does, but he says that he wants to attend this private boarding school in New Hampshire because his grades are terrific. It would allow him to get a scholarship, and that would lift him out of everything that's going on. Now, his parents can't believe it. He doesn't want to live with them anymore, but they barely really do anything for him. So really, can you blame him? I mean, they don't really have much of a relationship with Henry. Think about it. All this time, they thought that Paige was the good one. They thought that Paige was the one who got all the good grades, when in reality it was actually Henry. Henry was doing great this entire time, and they really had no idea. Henry's been at stands all this time, and that's something the Americans always does a good job with, is that things definitely do go down. We just don't see them happen because it's not vital to Philip and Elizabeth's life. It is, but they don't really make time for Henry. They always seem so they always seem so focused on Paige, and they don't really have a lot of time for Henry, because Henry's kind of just the odd one out. He doesn't know anything that's going on. He is the mundane of the most mundanes. Honestly, he really is. And he feels that he should get out of there because, they take school more seriously, and it's really something that he does want to do. And I thought that was definitely very well set up here. Like I said, I do think they're setting up Henry's exit to the show, but if this is how he leaves, I like that they're setting up that he wants to get away. And I don't know if he's actually ever going to find out. It's very sad to see, but I would not be surprised if we end the show with Henry still having no details or even any sort of hints of what his parents' extracurricular life actually does involve. I don't think he really has any sort of involvement with that, and honestly, I don't really think he cares that much. I think he's more focused on his grades, and I think, truthfully, his parents, while they are a part of his life, I don't think they are as important to him as they really should be, mainly because they really haven't given him the time of day or anything like that, so why should he give them anything? And I do think this is a very good way to possibly write him out of the show. So we then get to what is by far the most surprising scene of this entire episode, because we go to Russia here, and yeah, we're expecting to probably see Oleg, right? That's not who we see. We actually see Martha. Yeah, Martha was in this episode, and this isn't like episode 3 where we saw a brief cameo of her. No, we get a pretty big scene with her, and I really did love this because I, of course, always have sympathized for Martha. I mean, after everything she went through in season 4, I'm shocked she's actually living. I was like 100% certain that she would kill herself, but it seems that she's actually fine. Well, she's definitely not fine, but she is living in Russia, and we see her, she's frying onions for her baked potato dinner for one, and it's just very sad to see. You kind of get the sense this is kind of her life on a daily basis, like she's kind of forced to live in complete solitude, and then she gets a knock at the door, and it turns out it's actually Gabriel. Yeah, we actually saw Gabriel in this episode, which again, very surprising, but it makes a lot of sense why Gabriel's there for her, because she really only met him once as her life was falling apart, and the KGB was spiraling her out of the U.S. to this current paradise as a hero of the motherland, so she's obviously not thrilled to see him, because this is kind of the person who got her here, and he asks how her Russian is coming, and we see her, she is speaking a bit of Russian, but she says it's very hard, because she's not Russian. I mean, she's the farthest thing from it, and she's obviously worried about her family. There's a lot of things, and he says that her Russian will improve. Her life will get better when her Russian improves, and he promises her a good translating job when she can speak fluently, and she asks if her parents know where she is, and he says that they don't, but he spoke to them, told them that she was safe and being taken care of by people who respect her, and Clark thinks about her. He wanted to send her a letter, but it's not allowed, and he's the reason that he talked to her parents. He insisted that he wants what's best for her, and all of this is actually true, and I thought that was definitely interesting that we saw here, because we really do see that Gabriel, he's not really a liar, like he actually is telling her the truth here, but there's obviously a lot of stuff that she can't know. There's a lot of reasons why she is there, and she asks, what's best for her, and Gabriel says that all of it is. This is what is best for her, for staying in Russia, even though this is not really where she wants to be. Even though her parents don't know where she is, this is where she needs to be right now. And he really has no other news for her. He's just kind of there to check on her well-being. Again, it really says a lot about her character. It's, you know, his character. He's really there to help people, and he actually does want to be there for them. You know, he knows, obviously, she's going through a very rough transition, and it seems that she's doing it all alone. Like, she doesn't really have anyone to do it with her. She's forced to do it all on her own, and obviously it's a lot. And she tells him that she can go because she really does not need to see him, and tells him to not come back again. I think it's because she wants to kind of be used to being by herself, because she's going to be a lot. But also, Gabriel, again, is a living reminder of what her life used to be. And it's also a reminder of probably the most, you know, tumultuous time of her entire life, and I don't think she really wants to be reminded of any of that. Truthfully, if I was Martha, I'd want to forget any of it happened and try to move on, but that's just not possible. Just the amount of emotional damage that she's gone through, I just don't think Martha will ever be the Martha that we once saw her as. I think this is going to be the Martha throughout the rest of the show, and again, I don't think this is the last time we see her. I think we're definitely going to see her more in season 6. This is definitely setting up the end for her character, but I definitely think that she's going to kill herself. I mean, I just feel like after everything she's gone through, it just, there doesn't seem like there's another direction for her. Think about it. She's forced to live on her own, knows nothing about the culture, no prior experience with Russia, forced to learn Russia on her own. I mean, it just seems inevitable that this is it for her. Like, why else would she go to Russia? It just doesn't seem like she has much of a, you know, choice but to kill herself. If I was Martha, I definitely would do that, and I would not be surprised if we end the show the way. It'd be a very tragic direction for her, but I did like seeing her again. I like seeing she is still part of the story, and that's something the Americans always seems to do well. You think a character's gone, and they're not, and I think this is definitely setting up that we are going to see her more again in you know, more in season 6. I don't know if she's going to be as vital as a part. If we're going to Russia, she definitely will be, but I do think she is going to be around, and I think where we're headed is nothing short of tragedy. I think wherever Martha's headed from here, it's just not going to get better. It's going to get a lot worse for her, and I don't think it's going to get any better than it already has. So we go back to the US, and KGB eyes are all over Tuan. He's checking his watch, he's saying goodbye to his friends, and he's just being very shady. He heads to this Greyhound bus station to catch a ride to Harrisburg, PA, of all places. We don't know why, but again, this isn't exactly making him look any more, you know, any less shady than he already was. I mean, this makes him look even shadier, honestly. So back in Moscow, we see Oleg. He's been summoned to PGU headquarters at Yasenevo in the Russian Foreign Intelligence Services version of the CIA's Langley, Virginia. And the PGU officials basically thank him for cooperating at his apartment, that they needed the names of every foreigner that he had contact with in America, both professionally and personally, and he says that they're all in his reports, and they say that the reports have every casual encounter, nightclubs, restaurants, bars, to give it some thought, and Oleg insisted he couldn't possibly remember the names of every single individual he encountered. I mean, it's impossible. Who can do that? I mean, who can literally name every single foreign encounter they've ever had? Just, there's no way you could, because half of them were probably just in passing, and you probably didn't even know their names. So how the hell is he supposed to do that? It just seems like kind of an impossible task. But he says, you know, they say to write down the names, whatever names he can, to give it back to them within the next 48 hours, and they're especially interested in his relationship with Stan and why efforts to recruit him as a double agent failed. And they also question him about Nina, who was executed last season, and Oleg tells them that they should know, if they don't know already, that they were involved with each other. So he clearly does want them to know that, and they ask if he was angry about what happened to Nina, and much like Gabriel, he hasn't really lied at all. Again, he's really telling the truth in this whole thing. He's keeping himself afloat and above suspicion, which is very smart. Obviously, he knows he obviously is in a very tenuous position right now, where if he says anything that just sounds a bit just off, this could really end up make matters worse for him. So basically, he's just telling them the facts, not what he thinks they want to hear. He says he's still angry about it, but he really couldn't do anything. And Oleg is luckily released because he pretty much said all the right things. And he comes home to find his parents bickering. His mother leaves the room, and Oleg tells his father that he knows that she was in the camp. And his father is surprised that she actually told him, and basically says he doesn't want him to think about it. He doesn't want him to, you know, because every family does have a story like that. But his father has more of a story to volunteer anyway, that when they took her away, he thought about killing himself, and she got out, and they had him and his brother, and he thinks that she was the same person, but she just wasn't. She was different, and this is kind of the same when anyone goes to prison or when anyone's away from their family. You know, take a soldier, for example. When a soldier goes to sign up for war, they're usually very apprehensive, obviously, but they are optimistic. When they come out, most likely they will never be the same because war has just shaken them to their core. And that's something that kind of went down with Oleg's mother here, that she came in one person and then came out a completely different person. And ever since then, her father just, his father just doesn't have that same love for her anymore, which is very sad to see. But even more heartbreaking is when he says that he never saw her again. That girl he knew in the camp that she lost, they left their wives, and the families were, if they didn't have children, then he would have moved on, but he stayed with her. So they made the family, and now he's just kind of doesn't know what to do. I mean, now he's in a place where he doesn't want to be in that relationship anymore, but they have a family, and he just said that they had Oleg and his brother after she got out of the camp. So this is kind of confusing now, as we know. So the theory stands that the logging prison where Oleg's mother was detained is actually the same one where Philip's father worked as a guard. And again, I do think that we're going to see some sort of a connection there. There has to be some sort of a connection. It just seems too good to be true. Like, I think there's definitely a connection between Oleg and Philip. I don't know if they're blood related, but I do think they have some sort of familiar ties to each other. So we'll have to see what that really is about, but I do still stand by that theory. And this right here, like this little fact that we got here, is making that more obvious than ever. So Oleg asks why he didn't really ever tell her, and his father asks, if he could have this life such as it is, so he could have a good life. That's why he never really said anything. But later, Oleg goes to the prison to meet the food distributor, and they're pressuring him to give names about corruption in the produce business, and Oleg then brings him an apple, and the man doesn't want to name names, that these people, they're more powerful than he thinks, more powerful than KGB, and it sounds like the Russian mob, basically, that they are very powerful, and Oleg says he used to think his father was the most powerful man in the world because he's a minister, and when he was a kid, he liked his brother best, and Oleg continues that he denied it, but it really is true, that when his brother went to Afghanistan, his father could have gotten him out, but his brother wouldn't let him, that he was an officer, and now he's just a picture on the wall. So what he's really trying to say here is that he just doesn't see his father as his father. Again, maybe because he isn't his father. I very well could see a situation like that happening, where he just doesn't see this man as his father, because deep down, biologically, he's not actually his father. So he tells the grocery man that he's worried about the wrong people, that he should worry about putting his son in a picture, and the message is clear. Either he talks, or his son ends up being target practice for the Mahujadin. And basically, if he just continues saying right things, I think he'll be in the clear. But I do feel that eventually his emotions is going to kind of get the best of him, because knowing Oleg, I feel like that's definitely where we're headed here. But this was definitely very heartbreaking to hear all this stuff about Oleg, and I don't really know where we're headed, but I don't think it's going to be a good direction for him. But then we get to the big scene here. We're back in Harrisburg. Elizabeth and Philip are now part of the team. They're tracking Tuan. He ducks into an IHOP, and when he shows up finally back at their shared home in Virginia, they are obviously extremely confrontational, and they demand all these answers. Where was he just now? And he says that they caught surveillance on him, so he ducked into the IHOP, and Philip is saying to not lie to them. Where was he? And he gives them this whole story, and we don't know if it's necessarily true, but the way that Tuan was, it sounded pretty sincere. He says that his little brother's actually sick in Seattle, that he's really, really sick, and he called to check on him, saying he left the state so he wouldn't be caught, and he says to not put in the report because he knows it's a dumb thing to do, but he worked hard, he did everything, and this has nothing to do with that, and he's pleading now, not in the report, and he's lucky that they don't, just execute him on the spot. They could have easily done that, but they're driving home. Luckily, Tuan lives to spy another day. You can tell that they're very hesitant to do so, but I think he just sounded so sincere that they really didn't have a choice, and she asks what he thinks, and Philip says he doesn't know. She says that she believes him, and if they report it, they'd probably send him back to Vietnam, and Philip says that maybe he wants to be pulled out of this, and when Philip says that, I think he's really talking about himself. Like, he genuinely wants to be pulled out of this shit, and he thinks Tuan kind of wants to as well, but Philip, Elizabeth says it's just not who he is, and that is the way this episode ends. Really great stuff overall, but let's just get in this episode and where I think we're going to go from here. So overall, guys, I definitely really did enjoy this episode, but there really is a lot to think about moving forward because there is a lot that went down in this episode. First of all, like I said, that last scene with Philip where he's telling Elizabeth that, he wanted to be pulled out of this, I think he's genuinely talking about himself. He wants to get out of the KGB. I don't think it's going to work out, obviously, because they're going to get caught. I mean, it just seems inevitable. They're doing all of the wrong things, and all of these missions are kind of coming back to haunt them. I just don't feel like they're going to get out of this in the clear. I just don't feel that's possible in this situation, but we'll have to see really the way that's going to go down. As far as Tuan, though, I think Tuan did tell them the truth. Like, I think what Tuan said was in fact true. I think Tuan did in fact go to visit his brother, and I think Phil does have a bit of a point that maybe he doesn't really want to be a part of this anymore. But I don't know about that because he seemed very set on trying to get, on trying to get Pasha and his family out of the country, and I don't really know what exactly his motive is. But again, we don't know about a lot Tuan because Philip and Elizabeth don't know a lot about Tuan. That's something the show has always done well, is that we know as much as the characters do. That's how character-driven this show is, and that's something I've always really loved about the show, is that we only know what the characters know, and if they're hiding something from another character, we know exactly what that is, and we know very well why a character acts a certain way, and I think this is one of those situations where they just don't know enough about Tuan to really justify if he wants to leave or not. I think the audience is the same way. We don't really know enough about him to really say if he actually does want to leave or not, if he actually does want to be pulled out. I think Phil definitely has a point there, but I don't know if that's actually true. We'll have to see the way that really goes down. It was very interesting to see Martha here. I was very surprised that we did see Martha, but again, I think that is the show leaving things open. Like, we are going to see her again in Season 6. I would not be surprised if she is a very vital part of the show, because I've said it many times before, I think Season 6, we're definitely headed to Russia. It just seems like that's where everything is headed. There are just a lot of things that are kind of leading us up to that, and I would not be surprised if we end up going to Russia. And I wouldn't be surprised if Stan goes to Russia as well, because as we're seeing, he really is sympathizing with the Soviet Union. He understands what they're going through. He has that bond with Oleg, and he genuinely is the only person that really cared about Gad. And it's sad to see, but he really does care for these Russians. Not only that, but he kind of wants to advocate for them. Like, for example, the other Russian woman, Sophia, I think her name is, he really does want to help her, and he wants to give her all of those different benefits. And I think what she requested, I would not be surprised if he tries to adhere to that in the next episode, because I think he genuinely does want to help her. Not just as a means to get her to work for the FBI, I think he genuinely does want to help her, and I think there's definitely a part of Philip that really does care for the Soviet Union and really can understand where they're coming from, which again, a lot of the rest of the agents really just can't really do, because they just kind of see them as, pests and terrorists, and they just don't really see them as actual human beings. And it's sad to see, but that was very much the general attitude of most of the world at that time. We just kind of saw them as these communists, and we feared them very much. I mean, you guys can look back, there were so many commercials where they made fun of the Russians and things like that, and like I said, I think Stan is really one of the only people that genuinely does care for them, and I think there was definitely very well set up there. I definitely really did like the way that was all done. And then as far as Henry, I do think the writers are in fact writing him out of the show. I think definitely it makes sense why they're doing that. Just Henry's a character who, like I said, he never has really had a lot to do, and I think it's been intentional. I think genuinely Philip and Elizabeth, they have not paid enough attention to him. They don't know what's going on with him, and that's why we have not seen a lot of Henry. I think all of that definitely has been intentional from the start, and I think it would make sense if they actually do get rid of Henry in that situation. It'd be sad, definitely, but I do think it would make sense to do that. Overall, guys, I definitely really did love this episode. This is by far the best episode of the season in every sense of the word. I really did love what we got here, and I'm definitely giving The Americans Season 5, Episode 9, IHOP, a 4.5 out of 5, or an A. So over, guys, The Americans. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode overall. Loved your thoughts in it. And I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for tonight's episode of The Flash. And I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.